Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode, let me think, it's episode 117 of Album of the Day, and, I'm finally back, recently went back to school, and, now it's the end of summer, and it's been a couple of weeks since I last did a review, but I was just really busy with, first week of school and, stuff like that. But now I'm finally back to do a review of, an album that's, pretty much, not just an album by an artist, but like the album and the artist is kind of a full-blown kind of project here. It's a new collaboration between three very talented, song and critically acclaimed singer-songwriters. Like indie pop songstress Katie Lang, indie alt-country darling Nico Case, as well as indie folk singer-songwriter Laura Veirs. Have collaborated here for a new project known as Case Lang Veirs. So I'm here to review their self-titled debut album, which just dropped in June. As you can see, that's the album cover there. Really cool album cover on here. Really nice. The vinyl especially looks pretty nice with the cover art, so I may consider getting that. Anyway, there's the back here. And Tucker Martine's on production here, as well as the three songwriters mentioned here. Which, isn't surprising considering that he has worked with Laura Veirs on many of her records, and also Nico Case on her latest full-length record a little bit. The Worse Things Get, the harder I fight, the more I love you, which is definitely one of my favorite records of 2013, in my opinion. I've been obsessed with Nico Case's solo work for a few years now, especially albums like Fox Confessor Brings the Flood, which is probably my favorite of hers, and Blacklisted, which I reviewed back in January this year. There's the liner notes there. Basically, it's a photo of all three of them there in the studio. So not too much bells and whistles going on here, but, it's good enough. Anyway, there's the disc there. Just so I mentioned how I've been a fan of Nico Case's work for a little while. I know she's also been a member of the New Pornographers, which is like a supergroup featuring Nico, as well as AC Newman, Dan Behar, aka Destroyer, and a few others. I only really know one record from them, which is Electric Version, their 2003 album, which pretty much saw them getting their critical peak, and, pretty much getting some pretty wider attention. It is a really good album. I have to check out more of their stuff, but anyway. And also, believe it or not, I never really listened to the discography of Katie Lang or Laura Veirs, but, of course I was curious to check out this project since a lot of people seem to like it. So, yeah, that's the packaging there for self-titled debut from Case Lang Veirs. So, I wanted to talk about this record because this is probably one of the best collaboration records I've heard in a little while. I mean, let's talk about collaborative albums for a second before we kind of go into detail about this record. A lot of them aren't really that good, which is probably, what most people who are music fans in the first place would say. A lot of them don't feel like anything new or fresh. It, just feels like them just kind of repeating what they've done before, and not really bringing that much depth to the table. And also, there's some that are just really awful, meaning, there's some collaborative records where the two artists collaborating just don't mesh together well, mostly because they're from two different musical backgrounds, or that, they don't bring as much, depth or new ideas or stuff like that. And also they don't bring anything fresh or anything like that. So that's why in the past, I've been pretty critical about collaborative records, as it's kind of like, me being really critical about today's modern emo scene a little bit. However, while this record, it's not necessarily doing anything new or exciting for these artists, but I will tell you this album actually feels really fresh in terms of the songwriting. The vocal harmonies are beautiful. The instrumentation sounds pretty lavish on here as well. It's definitely a very refreshing collaborative effort from these three very talented monster sort of gifted singer-songwriters. I mean, you definitely got to give them credit for this. Now, let's talk about some specific tracks on here that I really like. The album opens with the song Atomic Number, which is, really nice opener with some sort of carefully finger-plucked guitars, some really gorgeous string arrangements on there as well, some sort of brushed drums on the track, as they're on there as well. And of course, one thing I noticed right away is how well their voices go together. One thing I noticed pretty quickly with this track is how well their voices mesh together. The kind of slightly raspy, kind of aged, but yet very, very sort of, but yet still pretty, fresh, refreshing, voice of Katie Lang. The kind of twangy, alt-country, kind of sour voice of Nico Case. Then you have the really sweet, sort of gentle voice of Laura Veirs. They all blend together pretty nicely. The perfect balance of flavor right there, I must say. And the lyrics, shows Nico Case's sort of, ability to, deliver, some pretty interesting and sort of, and talk about things that I, never really heard of. I mean, she talks about things on here like atomic numbers and supermoons and stuff like that, and makes it sound pretty poetic and, very beautiful. She's definitely known for being quite a, cinematic and interesting poet. With this record, pretty much, it's basically like a collection of different tracks fronted vocally and lyrically by either Nico, Katie Lang, or Laura on this record. Her Katie Lang songs, a lot of them seem to deal with sort of this relationship that she's in pretty much, and just kind of, the ups and downs about it, and she reflects on it very, she reflects on it in a very gorgeous and very poetic way on songs like Honey and Smoke, where she uses some wordplay like, I watch as they pour honey in your ears. And she talks about on this track about how other people are, other people may care about you, but no matter what they say, I gotta tell you that nobody will, care or love you as much as I do, pretty much. So it's pretty, So yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite. So it's definitely a great track lyrically. Then you have "Song for Judee," which is the first song, which features Laura on vocals, and on this track. So basically on most of the tracks, it's either one of the three doing the lead vocal and the other two harmonizing and doing the harmony vocals and stuff like that. And "Song for Judee" talks about this songwriter that Laura knows about, talking about how she really connected with that songwriter, talking about how Judee like lived in a lift 55 Cadillac and never really got a break from the car wrecks written about in her songs or anything like that. And but then she sort of wonders, why aren't you writing songs about your tortured past with like walking in streets at night or the drugs you took. And she very vividly brings up her being found with Judee being found with a needle in her arm, pretty much sort of, but I like how she sort of, really literally talks about how she really connected with, this songwriter's poetry. It's definitely one of the most interesting and one of the most kind of inventive lyrically tracks on the whole record. And the really kind of, and it features some pretty stripped down, quieter instrumentation, really nice piano and acoustic guitar and drums. And then you have this, and then in the middle we get this really somber cello that, sounds really beautiful as well. Then there's now for some unique, also we get a track called Delirium, which, Nico Case is known for writing songs that are also very personal and stuff like that. I mean, there are a lot of songs on Middle Cyclone and her last solo record that had a lot of those themes coming through in there, and in a very poetic and, sort of relatable way. This track sort of, uses some wordplay, like, sort of talking about, all this stuff that she's dealt with, is sort of, wondering if it leads to, like, her delirium, like, portrayed in, like, her songs or something like that. And then also we get the song Supermoon, which is another highlight for me on this record. The strings on this track, some of the best string arrangements that I've heard on this record, pretty much, and on like a folk singer-songwriter record, pretty much. Pretty much, and, I do like the lyrics on that track as well, and, stuff like that. A couple other songs, and now sort of back to Katie Lang's songs. We have Blue Fires, which, features sort of, the protagonist in the song sort of, wonders why the fire inside of her, like, burns blue and why everything else seems blue, pretty much, but so it's kind of a, song kind of, wondering about it, so wondering about it, stuff like that. And then we have Why Do We Fight, which, sort of, talks about the more serious side of the relationship Katie Lang seems to be in, pretty much, and does it in a really good way, for sure. Sure. And then we have Greens of June, which, is, definitely one of, the better songs in the record to be written by Laura Veirs on here. And, like, it's sort of about kind of realizing in the moment that, like, everything's changed. And somehow it kind of makes you want to live like never before, pretty much. Pretty much. Now, on to the vocal harmonies. But probably my favorite song on the record is probably the track Down I-5, which, of course, is written by Nico Case and has her on vocals. And, it's sort of a song dealing with kind of, this is, a really nice ballad. The piano in that track is absolutely gorgeous. And, it has some, as well as, some kind of ethereal guitars on the track. It's a more stripped down track musically. And I think a lot of these songs musically are kind of stripped back a little bit. It sort of leaves the three singer-songwriters on here room to sort of let their lyrics and vocals kind of take over the show a little bit. but not in a way that's overpowering or makes the music on here boring, or anything like that. It's sort of a song dealing with, the protagonist seems to have this tension, that she's pretty much had no good to see all this beauty passing by her, like, when driving at night. It's definitely one of the best songs I've heard about, like, that I've heard that's about driving at night in a little while. In a little while. A little while, pretty much. Some more of Laura Veirs' tracks. We have the closer, Georgia Stars, which is actually one of the darker cuts on the record. Laura's vocals on this track are distorted slightly to make them sound kind of insane a little bit. I think this song may be a murder ballad, but who knows? But, I love sort of the dark feel of this track. It's chilling organ, driving guitars, and percussion on this track too. And also the vocals on this track are definitely very powerful for sure. And, it's definitely one of the more twisted tracks on the record. It's kind of a curveball after all these kind of, these cuts that are a little lighter, pretty much. And I thought it was kind of cool to see that sort of show up, on this record. Now, let me talk a little bit, and then there's the track "I Want to Be Here with You," which sort of, is probably like the most probably the most positive song in the whole record. It's a pretty heartwarming track. It feels like kind of a big hug in the middle of these kind of, songs that deal with, a bunch of different feelings and really just personal struggles and stuff like that, but not in a way that, like, forces you to be happy or anything like that, in a way that's tangible and poetic and relatable. Plus I love the vocal harmonies on this track. It's, the chemistry that their voices have when, sung together are just incredible. Just incredible. It's a really nice sort of alt-country ballad with some pretty minimal instrumentation, with this pretty cool, keyboard on the track, this kind of drony, heavily tremoloed electric guitar to pair with the acoustic guitar, and I think I heard some bongos on the track as well. I'll talk a little bit more about the vocal harmonies. I mentioned how, the chemistry behind them is, pretty fantastic. But also, they definitely feel very crisp, and, I love how sort of, they pretty much, and they sound like the kind of singer-songwriters whose voices would go pretty well together. And yeah, I was pretty much, right about that. And I'll talk a little bit more about the instrumentation. I think there is some really nice sort of nuanced instrumentation on here. It's not necessarily very ambitious or experimental, but it is very lavish and well produced, and stuff like that. And it goes in. And the music sounds of this record, it's like a mix of like alt country, some indie rock, some alt country, folk, indie rock, maybe a splash of indie pop in there as well, since that's what Katie Lang's background is like on Honey and Smoke. Features this really peppy organ and piano on the track that I really like, as well as some pretty nice sort of lead vocals on the track, some really nice sort of, background vocals on the track, and also I think I heard a vibraphone on the song as well to pair with its bass and drums, and then we have Delirium, which has a little bit of a, sort of, 60s pop sort of flair a little bit with the orchestra bells and the really sort of, gorgeous and, sort of sweet string kisses that are worked into there as well as this organ that sounds as if it was pulled right out of the Magical Mystery Tour playbook or something like that. And then we have Blue Fires, which has this really which has this kind of sad, heavily distorted a little bit slide guitar solo on the track. And then we get Greens of June, which I already mentioned Supermoon, but then we have Greens of June, which has some really nice string arrangements on the track, to pair with this kind of jazzy instrumental on there. And then you have the pipe organ on the song. Have a pipe organ on the song Behind the Armory, which I thought was really beautiful as well. And also we have the song Why Do We Fight, which has some pretty ethereal, kind of dreamy sounds to it. There's this kind of woozy mellotron that goes into the track, a little pedal steel in the background, some really nice sort of grand hall, so the piano sounds as if it's being played maybe in some sort of grand hall or something like that, and of course some really nice vocal harmonies on the track. And yeah, so musically I think this record is pretty well done. It's not necessarily like, going in so many different musical directions that it's like, it's not necessarily it may not necessarily be very versatile, but still, I think it's very well produced. Now, I do think this record, has its pros, but it also definitely has its cons as well. I think this record, I wish some of the songs on this record were longer. I mean, there are a few songs on here where I like the tunes, I like the songs, but they could have been much improved if they were just a bit longer. And also, this record, doesn't really feel like an album. It feels more like just a collection of different songs from these three artists, but definitely a high quality one as well. Also, there are a few tracks on here that pale in comparison to others. Like Behind the Armory, I thought that track was a little too short for me, as well as, I thought it was okay, but just maybe a little underwhelming, as well as the track 1,000 Miles Away, which, I thought the lyrics on that track were good and stuff like that, but the instrumental was kind of a little too bare bones for me, and also the vocal melody at the end does get a little repetitive and a little old after a while. And then we have the song where I think the production kind of went a little overboard. I'm talking about the song Best Kept Secret. I do like the lyrics on that track. It's not a terrible song or anything like that, but just, it is a little kind of, I do find the mix to be a little too overpowered by the strings and the horns. It started out pretty pleasant at first, but they get old pretty fast, and eventually they lose their flavor and sort of become a little, obnoxious, as well as the background vocal melody does get a little grating after a while as well. Everything just kind of seems jumbled on top of each other, so that's why this track is probably, the weakest song on the whole record. But outside of those moments, I think this is a great record. I mean, don't come into this record being like, oh, I can't like this record because I'm a fan of these artists. This is gonna suck. No, it's not like that. It's not the case here. It's not necessarily, anything new or exciting for them, but still, it is definitely a very intriguing and very well done, nuanced collaboration here. So I'm going to give this record maybe a light 8 or something like that out of 10. Because, this one has it. It's not without its blemishes, but still, it's overall a great record. So this is my review of the debut album from Case Lang Veirs. See you for episode 118.